Gail, we're ready for you to take it away.
All right. Like most of these Tuesdays with oh great, this is awesome. I just looked at myself. I've got white horns coming out of my head. Oh, well, okay, more professional now. Like most of these Tuesday talks with CKLS, this came about by request. I have a lot of librarians who are new over the years, and they'll say, you know, what do I let the board know? They'll often have inherited a report from the board, and they'll stick with that. I've been to places in the last 10 years where the librarian was keeping track of things, and I would say, why are you tracking this? And she'd say, because we're required to, and that is something that had dropped off of the annual public survey report to the state maybe 5 years ago. So this is going to give you a little bit of information about what you should be reporting to your board, what you don't need to report to your board any longer, ideas of other things to help you report to the board. And I think I'm probably going to say report to the board a bazillion times in this hour, so bear with me. I'm glad you're here. I do see a really good selection of librarians. One of the things I want to do first is practice something. If you're at your desk, and I know some of us have this on and we're listening and we're working, but if you're at your desk, what I want you to do is down below the picture where it says Participants 15, I want you to click on that so that on the right-hand side of your screen, a white bar opens up with everyone's name. And then after you do that, I want you to click in that white bar on the right, raise hand. So you can see that I just raised my hand in the white bar. I want everybody to practice that, raising your hand. Good job, Marilyn, Joanna, Erica, Cheryl, Kelly, good, Linda. If you're having any trouble with that, I want you to, in the chat, send a message and we can help you figure out how to get there. If I click lower hand, of course my hand will lower, and then if I click participants again, that white bar will disappear. One of the reasons that I'm going to have you practice that, and I might just do it out of the blue, I don't think so, but is because we're looking at using this hand raising as a way to vote for the business meetings, the annual business meetings, if you're not able to physically attend. So that's one of the things that at the rest of the Tuesdays with CKLS we're going to look at. There are some other features that we might try, but it seems to me that if we write our name and our library afterwards, we can raise hand, and then the CKLS people can record that and see how people vote. Because we've had people who they just, for whatever reason, their life, they can't attend the business meeting, but they want to be a part of that process. Okay, I'm going to slide that over there, and I'm going to get started. The first part of this is going to be a little bit like trustee training, except it's for librarians. If you've ever attended one of the CKLS trustee trainings, hopefully some of this stuff will be familiar to you. When we do trustee trainings, we talk about what the board needs to do a good job, and the director's report is a really important part of this. One of the documents that I'll be referencing again and again is the trustee resource guide. I'm going to go ahead and drop that into the chat for everyone, and then you can click on that. Or if you've got a copy at your desk, you can open it up. If you don't want to do that, that's fine. I'm going to let you know what pages these things are on. And my document is already available to you, and it has the pages called out as well. So I'm starting from with the trustee resource guide. On page 6, it talks about things library board members can do to mess up their library. And one of them is that board members don't understand that they're to work with the librarian in long-range planning. Most of our CKLS libraries do not have any sort of long-range planning. They don't have, if you're going to formalize it and call it a strategic plan, they don't have anything like that. And You don't know what you need to do to get there if you don't know where there is. And I think that's one of the things that we'll be talking a lot about over the next few years, especially as in next year CKLS is going to roll out strategic planning. So we'll actually see that process modeled for you, and you'll be an active part of that process. And I think what you'll be able to see is how valuable that is to an organization. Yes.
The link is asking me to request for permission. So can you check your sharing on that, please?
Okay, it's just in the
I can get it. I'll fix
yeah,
it.
it's just in there. Just one of them. It was nothing special. I just pulled it out. Okay, thank you, Mary Beth. So board members need to be able to plan long range, and it's important because they work with the librarian on that. Remember that board members are representing everyone in your community, and as the librarian, you're specifically working with what we call the program of the library, and that doesn't mean that's your programs like story time and book club and stuff like that. It's just the overall program of the library. Often at board meetings, board members spend a lot of time talking about what has already happened, about past progress. The board needs to take the responsibility, of course, the phone. I'll let it be. The board needs to take responsibility for long-range planning very seriously. They need to set a course for the future, and then they need to spend some significant time looking forward during the board meeting. And there's a couple of ways they can do that. We'll talk about consent agenda in a little bit, but what really helps the board plan for the future is what the librarian is reporting about what's going on, about what happened, about what failed, about what was successful, about what we've been hearing, about what patrons want. On page 9, there is some information about a library board self-evaluation. I know we've talked a lot about doing an evaluation on the director, and I believe that the library board at least once a year should also do a very brief informal self-evaluation. On that self-evaluation, which is included in that trustee resource guide, Mary Beth just showed a good link to that. One of the questions is, does the board meet frequently with the benefit of agenda, detailed minutes, and appropriate reports sent in advance of the meeting? I know that not every library board meets monthly. That is not a requirement by law. For the life of me, I can't figure out how you handle bills if you're not meeting monthly. But those meetings do need to be scheduled well in advance. When the board sets down together for the first time with new board members in June, all the board meetings for the year need to be set in advance. And of course, special circumstances might mean a change. You know, the meeting in December might have to be canceled or rearranged because of weather, things like that. The reason that that needs to be done is because if anyone comes to your library, and they don't even have to live in your town, if anyone comes to your library and says, hey, I want to get notification of the meetings in advance, you need to be able to give them right then and there the year's list of all of the meetings. You can also have people come and say, I want to get the board information. And that's where having this a little bit formalized makes it nice, because you need to mail them the full board packet every month, just as you would any other board member. And you're required by law to do that. That's part of the Kansas Open Meetings Act, under which libraries fall. So on page 13, some of the core competencies for trustees are strategic planning. They have to work with the director, and this is where your part comes in, which is every bit as important, to develop a long-range plan for the library with input from the staff, the director, citizens, and from your community leaders. I know that most of us haven't done that, and it's really critical. It does need to be done. The reason that it emphasizes that is with the librarian or the library director, remember you're both, you're not different, we just call you different things, is because you bring different pieces of information to the table. and I'll come back to that in a little bit. Does another core competency for trustees is finance. They need to know and understand the board's role in keeping the public trust. And part of that public trust is open meetings and open records. The board minutes should be published. If you have them electronically, and everyone should, you can even post those to your library website or to post a link to Google if you're keeping those in the cloud, say in Google Drive. That is one way that the board can keep the public trust. Another way is that the board, they're good stewards of the funds and the resources they're given. They need to understand the full budget process, the cycle from January 1st to December 31st on all of the things that happen in there. They need to be informed about the library finances. I've been to some meetings more than one time in a row where there have been no financials available because the treasurer was gone for the winter, something like that. I think that if that's the case, the librarian needs to step in and at least give a very brief summation of the state of the financials, the health of the financials. You can't plan for the future unless you've got a good rein on what you're spending money on now. And you're going to need to look at what is not necessary or what is redundant in ways that you can plan for the future. It's like your own finances. And under this bullet for finances, the board needs to have adequate time and information for making decisions and to know the impact on services. And that ties right back to that strategic planning process and the librarian's report to the board. I think that, librarians need to give a brief narrative, and that is, a paragraph or two kind of about what's going on, what you're working on, and then statistics. And I'll have examples for you to look at there. In the trustee resource guide on page 14, there are core competencies for librarians. Librarians need communication, collaboration, solutions, and organizational skill. In communications, we know that all librarians need to communicate well with patrons and with staff, but librarians also need to communicate well with board members, and that is done most often in their role as board members in the librarian or the director's report to the board. Many of us have board members who come in and use the library. That's awesome, and we see them, how are you doing, things like that. That's not the time to communicate to them the things that you're going to put into your board report. Librarians need to collaborate, cooperate, and work well with others, and that leads right back to working with your board. If you've got a board that you feel isn't going anywhere, maybe they don't have the right information, or maybe they haven't been trained yet, or they don't realize really how important their job is. Honestly, if you've been to a trustee training, I say again and again that I feel that library board members are some of the most important volunteers in the state of Kansas. There are Kansas statutes annotated multiple times, lots of them, that direct how library board members should operate and govern the library. They think, legislators thought it was so important that they put it into statute. Librarians need to focus on solutions instead of problems, and that's where coming to CE events like this one and, oh my goodness, ARSL, Association for Rural and Small Libraries Conference, was last week, and it was amazing. If you have problems that you're not able to find solutions, first talk to your board. Are you able to work through something together? And if not, then that's where CKLS comes in, or that's even where visiting with a neighboring librarian and saying, hey, we're having this going on. Is there any way any way we can help? Diane says ARSL, whoop, whoop. She's right. It may very well have been the very best ARSL. And we'll get back to that at the end of this and start talking about next year already. And on page 14 for core competencies for librarians, librarians need organizational skills. Okay, my desk does not look organized, but I'm pretty organized in real life. I just like stuff around me. I haven't yet met a deadline, but I'm not even a year in, so I'm hoping to keep my good record going. By organizational skills, that's talking about not just the physical organization of the library, but the organization of the files, specifically the organization of the records and the statistics is how I'm interpreting that for this Tuesdays with CKLS talk. The organizational skills will make a difference in what you're reporting and how you're reporting it. So with that given, I'm hoping that you're seeing how important it is for the library director to give a good, solid report to the board. There are specific things that should be included in the board, but first I'm going to talk about consent agenda. With a show of hands, woohoo, how many library directors use what they believe is a consent agenda? Go ahead and raise your hand. I'm raising mine, just because it's fun, doggone it. Okay, we've got Linda Scott from Lebanon, Kelly from Phillipsburg, Erica from Kensington, Diane is a board member in Bison, and the Barnard Library, which is probably Bernie there, are all using a consent agenda. And then the CKLS people don't, because they don't work directly with the library board. Go ahead and lower your hand now. So isn't that fun? Okay, so because we have a number of people who don't use a consent agenda, I'm just going to go over that briefly. If you are a librarian that first came to your library, I'd say within the last 3 or 4 years, and I was the one that went out and did your library training, or Mary Beth went out and did your library training, we've talked to you about consent agenda because it's rockin' awesome. With a consent agenda, this is where the librarian's organizational skills come into play. What you want to be able to do is send out the entire board packet at least 1 week, 1 full calendar week, 7 days, to your board members before the meeting. Now I say send out because some of the board members come by and get them. I know some librarians swing past and drop them off on their way. We'll just say send out, and whatever that vehicle to get those packets to your board members looks like, we'll call it send out. In Great Bend, we send our financials out to the accountant, and sometimes that means that one of the office ladies is driving those board packets around to everybody and dropping them off, because we often don't get those in time to actually mail those. So what happens then is that the librarian or the director and the board chair, just a minute, Marilyn, and we'll look at that. They get together ahead of time and prepare the agenda. Okay, Marilyn, what do you say? Okay, Marilyn says they used to do the consent agenda, but the treasurer's not been getting her the report, and sometimes the secretary doesn't either, so she's got nothing but her librarian report to send out. And what I would say is that the board chair needs to address that. That is the board chair. It has the responsibility to have the board members doing what their position requires when it requires it. And if you need to, we can talk about that later. And Erica says same here. So what happens with the consent agenda is everybody gives you your stuff early so that they get everything a week in advance, and then the board members are under obligation then to look through the packets and to make themselves familiar with the information before the meeting ever starts. So what that means then is at the beginning of the meeting, you know, you can approve the agenda, you can approve the packet as received, you can approve the finances and the meeting minutes as received in the first 5 minutes of the meeting. And so then you've got the rest of the meeting to move forward. You're not going to spend a half an hour talking about the past. You're going to move forward. And it's so important. So Erica and Marilyn, visit with your board chair, and if you're having problems with that, go ahead and give us at CKLS a call, and we'll help you work on that concern. So many times I see at board meetings without a consent agenda, that, or even with a consent agenda, that the board members don't really look through those financials like they should. And one of the things that I do in my board meeting for both CKLS and for the library is I look at the financials ahead of time, and then I go through and I highlight some things that I think that the board should be paying attention to, usually 2 or 3 things. And so what I've got them doing is during the meeting, I've got them looking at this, and then I'm explaining to them why that was. One of the things that we just did, I had my Great Bend Library Board meeting last night, was I pointed out that the library wrote a pretty significant check to CKLS. And so the agreement is that CKLS pays the salary of the shared staff, and then the Great Bend Public Library pays CKLS quarterly for their portion of that, because some of us work for both entities. And Katrina has the same thing, that the secretary doesn't have the meeting minutes written up. And again, I would say that I would visit with your board chair, and they need to address your board members with that information. Okay, so you've got everything approved and you've got time to move forward. But if they don't have good information from the librarians, they still are missing part of the puzzle piece that's going to help them plan for the future. And that is where we come back to the librarian's report. In part of the file here for this, the folder for this presentation, I probably have 10 or 15 different libraries. They sent me in their board reports, and I turn them into PDFs and put them in because they're all different, they're all good. There's one that is anonymous, and that's one that I'm going to show to you because from what I've been talking about and what I'm going to talk about, you can see that that board report is not going to help the library move forward. The librarian's report to the board should include a narrative about what happened in the last month, just the highlights. If you've ever had to write an incident report for the library, a patron got injured, you know, you need to write about it. You're not going to write 3 pages. You're going to put in just the who, what, when, where, why, and how, just that brief information. Some librarians are not so comfortable with a narrative and they prefer a bulleted report. That's awesome too. That works just as well. You're going to put in a list, a running list of upcoming programs. We've started doing that at our CKLS department head meetings, and I think we started it this year. And what it does is, it's on the agenda, what it does is it honestly saves at least 10 minutes from every board meeting, not pulling out our calendars and hashing it out, and then one person can't connect to their phone and somebody else's pencil broke and things like that. It's all right there. That's an amazing thing to do, and you can do that with your board members. If you've got book club coming up, go ahead and put that in there. If you tell them what your story times are, you're not just letting them know in case they're interested, you're letting them know because hopefully they'll be doing word of mouth marketing, and that is your best marketing dollars spent. They're going to be at the grocery store, or they're going to see somebody at the cafe with their grandkids, and they're going to say, hey, did you know story time's coming up? We just had campfire story time, and cowboy story time's coming up next. That's your marketing you're doing there. You're not only letting them know what's going to happen, but when, and they can put that out. One of the things I also like to do, because I'm big on training my board members. I have one new board member this year, like most of you do, but a lot of the board members somehow missed this information in their training. I put in deadlines of what's coming up. So in my Great Bend meeting last night, I put that we're coming up on the CKLS competitive grant deadline, which is the end of October. And I said that here's what some of the things the staff and I have come up with, and we will write a proposal and we'll bring that to you next month so that you are well aware of that and go ahead. And then I'm going to get their sign off. But they already know that that's what we're going to be doing. They already know that in December we're going to be looking at how we spent money, what we spent money on, because in January it's time for us already to start the budget cycle for 2020. I believe that board members should never make an important decision in any less than 3 meetings. 3. The first one is informational. You tell them what they need to know, what's going to happen. Don't discuss it, just give them the information, any fact sheets they may need. The second one, I can do this, there it is. The second one is time for discussion, and the third one is time for action. That's when they're going to make decisions. So in your upcoming board deadlines, that's where you're going to be feeding them information for the future. Of course, they need financials. They need the budget report. It's like the check register, approval of the bills, any upcoming grant opportunities, any donations that may have been received from the library, any cash that's coming in. They need to know if you've been involved in any community engagement beyond outreach or book delivery. I know a lot of places will do story time at a preschool. I would put that in there still. And a lot of librarians will also deliver books to assisted living. I would go ahead and put that in there still, because that's an important part of what you're doing in your job. Which reminds me that if you're delivering books to assisted living, you should not be doing that on your own time. That should be part of your wages. It's not volunteering. You can't volunteer on your own time. And I would also suggest that you go over the financials with a fine-tooth comb and really start looking for things to point out to the board. Point out, hey, this line item, this check number we spent on books for this reason, things like that. Community engagement, of course. This is something I've not seen a lot of, but I think that this would be very important to include, and this is any kind of staff training that took place. So if you're attending this webinar, then in your next month's board report, or the board report where you're reporting on what happened in September, you're going to include the librarian attended the Tuesdays with CKLS talk on the director's report to the board. Or if you're like Diane, you went to ARSL, if she were reporting back to the CKLS board, she would put in there that she went to ARSL and some tidbits of information about it. I know that we talk a lot about CE at CKLS. I think that's one of the very best things you can ever do for your library, is have a well-trained librarian and a well-trained board. But most of us don't know that we should be asking our board a full month prior for permission to go to these things. Remember that the board is responsible for the budget, and the board needs to make sure that there's money for attending the CE events in the budget, especially if you go beyond the $700 and for whatever reason you don't, the $700, and you don't want to ask CKLS or anything like that. That's one of the reasons that CKLS publishes our events well in advance, so you have time to take that back to the board and ask. I also think that you should be reporting any computer problems. Now, I'm not really, I don't mean that like the mouse is wonky on patron computer number 2, or little things. What you're looking for are trends with these computer problems. You're looking for the staff computer keeps shutting down out of the blue, or we can't make updates. It takes forever to do updates because the up and down speed on the broadband is too slow. Those are the kinds of things your staff needs to know, and they need to know them because replacing computers and other forms of technology are expensive, and they need to be able to plan ahead for that. And so those are all kinds of things that can be in your narrative or your bulleted list. And then you should start talking about statistics. And here's where you've really got a lot of leeway. I'm going to go through a big list of things. That's not to say that these are things that you need to report every single time. If you've ever filled out the annual state public library survey, you're going to recognize a lot of these items because they are on that end of year survey. And so if you do elect to report them every single month and maybe even in some form of spreadsheet that you then copy and paste and make it pretty for them. What that means then is that in January, when it's time for you to fill out that report, it's going to be a piece of cake. It shouldn't ever take you more than an hour to fill that form out if you've been organized and if you've been communicating these things to your board throughout the year. Okay, statistics. Yes?
I think it'd be helpful if we could see your list that you're reading from.
I will show it to you.
Thank you.
How do I make that happen, Mary Beth? I can't hear you.
At the bottom of your screen, there should be a button that says share.
Share screen.
Share screen, and then pick your screen.
It's this one. Okay, let me move it over here. Can you see it now?
No.
Share screen. I have to click the other button too. Now you should be able to see it, yes?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So not just a talking head. Okay, circulation. I do not believe that circulation statistics alone show the health of a library. I don't think they show that the community may be using the library for other things than books. So you're going to report circulation because it's required by the state, it's required by the feds, but don't make it your #1 emphasis. So in circulation, you're going to talk about things that circulate physically from your library and digital. You should be reporting your Sunflower eLibrary statistics every single month. And you should be pointing those out to your board. If you are promoting Sunflower, you will see those statistics increase drastically while your print or things from the library circulation may not increase and might even decrease. With your circulation, you can break it down by format and by age. And by format, I mean audiobooks, books, playaways, other sorts of things. And by age group, I mean adult, teens, and juvenile, if that's how you break it down. It's also nice to compare the current month's circulation with the previous year and to show your total circulation to date. One of the things that I found that a lot of people aren't showing is in-house material use. And in-house are all those things that you end up picking up at the end of the day. All the board books that somebody got out and played with and looked at, the newspaper that somebody read and left on the table and didn't put it back on the shelf. Those are your in-house use. And what those show is actually, again, what's being used in the library, but not being circulated. For technology, you need to show, you need to show your computer use. Again, this is required by the state. There are a number of easy ways to track that. I'm sure you're already doing that. If you're frustrated with how you're tracking and would like an easier way, give us a tootle and we will help you with that. Most of us do not have ways to track our wireless, and so you have to estimate that. Anything that you estimate, just use the same way every single time, and then you're going to have consistent statistics. Remember that I talked about your outreach. If you are doing outreach and you're delivering books to either preschools, daycares, or assisted living homes or wherever, keep track of the numbers that you're delivering. What that shows is it's worth your trip. It's to the board, it's worth it for you to take time out of the building to go do those deliveries. Of course, you need to keep track of your interlibrary loan count, how many you loan and how many you request, how many go unfilled. You need, for Pathfinder libraries, you keep track of how many you have borrowed and lent out on PIL, and you need to keep your door count. How many of you are still writing down a tick mark on your calendar when anybody enters the door of the library to keep track of your patron count? If you are, I beg of you to stop. That is the hard way, and it no longer needs to be done that way. In fact, we recommend, we recommend that you keep track during a busy month, say July, and a low month, probably January, and you use those averages for the whole year. You do not need to keep track of that every single month. Now, you'll need to let your board know that CKLS said that this is the good way to do it now, and so it's going to look a little bit weird. You might not have a door count every single month, but they're going to have a good view of your actual people entering the library over the course of a year without the librarian running back and forth to the calendar. If you're having programming, you need to keep track of your program count by the name of the program and the age group it was attended for. You also need to keep track of the attendance, and I would do that with a rolling total for how many people have attended programs for the whole year. There is a lot more that you can keep track of with programming, and I think that's a whole nother webinar in and of itself. What you might want to do is also start program evaluations and ask a different question at every program. Programs can be expensive, and when you go beyond just the how many attended and what we did, that's when you can really get into seeing the value of programming in your library with outcomes. You also want to keep statistics on your collections. The total number in the titles in the collection, the number of items added, the number of items deleted. We'll look at this again in a little bit when we go and look at some reports. If you do reference, and that is any question that you're asked beyond where is the bathroom or how do I get to the post office. Those are wayfinding questions. They don't count as reference questions. Keep track of your reference questions answered. If you've got any sort of meeting room in your library, you want to keep track of the meeting room use, how many groups use it, and a total of how many people use it, because that's also indicative of a new way that your library is being used other than circulation. Most of you proctor tests. Count and report that to your board. That is, again, a way to monitor a service other than circulation. And then the last part here that I really haven't seen in a lot of reports, and it is something that we're getting ready to add to our report at Great Bend, because I realize that we're not tracking all of the ways that we're reaching out to our patrons, is through the website and social media and marketing. If you've got a WordPress website, it's really easy to see how many people landed on your page. You can also see which pages they go to the most. If you're on Facebook, you can go in and you can see how many people you reached through any specific post. And you should keep track of your marketing efforts. So that would be, are you posting things on Facebook? Are you posting them on the website? Are you making flyers and handing them out? Let your board know how many you're doing. It's very common in big libraries for them to say, hey, what brought you to this program today? And that's actually a sneaky way to find out if your marketing has been effective. Okay, I'm done with this document. That surely has to be enough talking from me on this. Any questions on this? No? Okay. I'm going to come here, and this is the folder that you'll all have access to. You can see that the resource guide is in here, and there's a document on consent agendas. There's a document on comparison of responsibilities, and if you look through that, you'll see that it is the library director and the board's responsibility to forward plan together, and a whole bunch of things. But what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to call Katrina. Katrina inherited a way of doing an agenda in Belleville and statistics, so I'm going to open up the agenda. It's pretty basic, but it's also really good in many ways. You know, the call to order, public comments, minutes, correspondence. In the librarian's report, she gives a circulation report, the budget report, which is different than the financials, presents bills for approval and talks about donations and grants received. She also, as part of their packet, they get a really comprehensive page front and back of statistics. Here, I think this is important, the monthly activities. She can talk briefly about that, or it can be in a written report. And number 11, upcoming events. That way the board knows they can be talking about what's coming up. On the other hand, when I ask for reports, this is what I got from one of the other librarians. In my report, I include any problems with equipment. That's awesome. Building problems, very good. As well as a generalized report on events upcoming and recently past. Ideas for things in the future. And of course, she asks the board's opinions and approvals. I've got a concern about the second paragraph. I also send fairly regular email reports to the board. It's awesome to stay in communication to your board, but when your board is communicating through email, that is called a serial meeting, and it's a violation of the Open Meetings Act. It's okay to communicate with the board chair, but not with the whole board. I understand the intent of this, and that's to keep the board informed. It's just that the way that this is, it's a violation of the Open Meeting Act. She'll report on behavioral issues, of course. I am also bothered by the last thing, but that's okay. But that I wanted to bring that out, the serial meeting. I'm going to come back to the Belleville statistics, because in this instance, you've got the first page, and then the second page is circulation statistics. And Katrina, I'm not calling you out, you inherited this. And so I suspect that the circulation statistics may come like this or very similar to this right from their checkout system. They are not a Pathfinder library. In my mind, there's a lot of overkill on here, especially with the adult nonfiction and large print fiction versus nonfiction, oversized books, reference, professional genealogy. If you're keeping these statistics for yourself internally to let you know what part of the collection is circulating, so you know if I need to get more books in oh my goodness, in any one of these areas, that's good, but your board doesn't need to know this. If they can spend 2 hours a month, and that's all a board should be spending, that's 1 hour to meeting and 1 hour preparing for the meeting, they don't need to be reading this information. So what I would do here is I would do adult fiction, adult nonfiction. I would include large print as part of those counts. And then it would be all of that other stuff, and it would be your total adult books. I would do total DVDs or audio-visual, which includes music here, and I would do that. I would do a total of teen, and I would not break it out by genre. I would do the same thing for Juve and add in the beginning board books and the beginning readers, and I would do total juvenile AV. I would not have all of this extra stuff in any of these categories.
Dale?
Yes?
We have a question. It's what about sending out board packets by email, but no discussion is involved? Does that violate Open Meetings Act?
That does not. No discussion does not violate the Open Meetings Act. That's just giving information.
And then if you have a patron or a public member comes in and asks for that packet, you would email that same packet to them as well.
That's right. That's absolutely right. That means that you're compliant with the Open Meetings Act and you're good to go. Now there's some really good stuff on here. Again, for the board to know this, it's probably a little bit of overkill. For ILL, they may just need to know your total transactions for the month. See here on the front, it's kind of like a glance. The total circulation is here for adult, and for children's, I'm assuming that teens roll into children's as well. Undefined items, they certainly don't need to know what that is if you don't even have a name for it, if it's undefined. If you're circulating magazines and newspapers, that's good, and I believe it's paperbacks here. Bravo, because I see here that ebooks are reported every month with the rolling total for the year. Okay? Interlibrary loan, you're going to do total statistics. Other statistics are also good. You've got library visits, new patrons, total patrons, the meeting room use, the number of programs in attendance, broken down by age because those are required for that annual statistic, computer use, a good estimate at wireless computer use. You could even roll children's computer use in with total computer use. I can't right now remember if it's separate on the state report. Homebound delivery is here. Newspaper lookups are things that they have newspaper records there. Test proctors here is good. Volunteer hours is another great thing that's on here. They have a pretty robust volunteer program up in Belleville, and this is reporting to the board how many volunteer hours are being logged each month. I think this is great. You can see, wow, May, of course, is a banner month. June, even more so, right during smack dab in summer library program when they bring on their teen volunteers as well. Volunteer hours is something that I'm going to be adding to my report. And then here down at the bottom, you can see that it's a very brief synopsis of the cash monies that have been received in the library with the cash balance at the end. I had Peggy make this into I think it's this one. It might be this one. Yes, our Peggy made this into a spreadsheet, which you'll have access to. If you want to use this, you certainly may. It would help you keep track of everything for the end of the year. You would just pop your numbers in here. Close that. I also reached out to other libraries in the state. I somehow have, there I can go, now I can see what I'm doing. I've reached out to other libraries in the state, big libraries, to see what they're doing in their board reports. And, you know, it's pretty much what we're doing as well. One of the things, if you look under the Emporia copy of the circulation, you can see also that they've got all these different item types. I suspect, again, that this is just copied and pasted right from a report from their circulation system. They don't use Koha either. Let's see, the Emporia board packet here, again, an agenda, library board training, and the next board meeting will be held. Here's the director's report to the board. This is my friend Robin. She very much believes in educating her board, and you can see that she uses a lot of things in her report to the board so that they know what's going on. One of the things that I really liked here is that she broke it down into categories: management and planning, finance, public relations, marketing, advocacy, programming, facility, and professional development. I thought that was really clever. That's something that I'm going to adopt for myself as well.
Okay.
Yes?
We have a comment from Joanna in Smith Center.
Mm-hmm.
I also include statistics on interlibrary loan borrowing and lending by both PIL and Share It, and courier packages sent. This allows the board to see how important and economical the courier is and how much we are doing to supply our patrons with what they want.
Brilliant.
They are also aware of what we are serving, aware that we are serving patrons within CKLS and outside of CKLS.
That's brilliant. What you may also want to do every now and again, Joanna, is talk to them why PIL is important because of system membership. You need to offer the same library services to anyone within the CKLS 16 county region, and that part of having the courier service, having that privilege, is signing the KIC agreement, the courier agreement form, or the interlibrary loan agreement form that says that you will share freely with everyone in the state as well. I think that way they can talk to people about it. When somebody says, hey, what's that courier truck always coming up to the library for? Your board members know, and they can just whip that right out. And especially if that's an elected official, that would be amazing. I like what Robin had to say here in finance. It's just she's giving them a really big picture idea here. And then in programming, she said that she was accepted to present. Facility, this is something I'm absolutely going to borrow from her. Obviously, they're doing a ceiling tile replacement project. They're looking at renovating the children's room, and they're having the library closed for some maintenance days for really deep cleaning. And I really like that she's reporting that to the board so that they know. For me, that would help me stay on track with the big projects like cleaning windows inside and out, and the deep cleaning the carpet and upholstered furniture. Her professional development would be the same thing as your continuing education, same thing, things that she's doing and where she's serving. Then each department for her gives a very brief synopsis, but this is a good way. This small little table right here shows the statistics for the programs, the names of the programs, how many people attended, and then below just a little bit of what's going on. And you can see that these are very different. Every department head includes different things, but I think it's interesting to read what everybody else was reporting. It's not like looking in somebody's medicine cabinet, not like that, but it's just really kind of cool to see what's going on and what they're considering important to let their board know. They've got a very, very busy teen department. Of course, this is during summer library program, but I want you to notice here on the coding club for July 5th, the count was 2, the count was 1, the count was 4. Even in big cities, they might not always have a huge count for any sort of program. Maybe this is something they just started and they're just getting it rolling. Who knows that when school starts up, it's going to be really busy. One of the things that I liked here is that each department head is also reporting their continuing education, webinars that they're watching, and things like that. Any meetings that they're attending. They have a committee, a personnel committee, and that's when they included that. We've got an executive session here that's reported out very well. I also got Dodge City. I did not include that full packet because they're doing something in their board report that actually is getting ready to stop. They were including the amounts of paychecks for every single employee. And while that certainly is public knowledge because we're paid with tax dollars, I don't think we need to wave that into anybody's face and let them know what's going on. That is something that stopped in August. This is a nice way to do the reports. You can see that they actually are spending some time making these separate from just what's downloaded from your integrated library system or your checkout system. Here down in the corner, they've got website visits, but I didn't see that they had the people that they'd reached on Facebook or the number of things that they'd posted on Facebook. That's something that they could certainly add in. Holds placed and new cards. That way the board knows we're borrowing things. People are checking things out. I also thought that for their processing records, what they're doing is they're also including repaired, which was kind of interesting. I suppose on DVDs they're talking about DVDs that are being cleaned. This is here for you. There's some great ideas. I had Liberal also send a board packet. Very brief, gets it done, who's present, your minutes, an informational item. This is wonderful. This statement of funds is so easy to read and so clear to call things out to board members. I just loved this. This is their check register. So if it were me, I would talk about, oh my goodness. Oh, I can't think. Oh, here, the Rotary Club. It looks like they're paying for the librarian to be a member of Rotary Club to represent the library, and I would make sure that the board knew about that. After that, then they also have their credit card statements, Walmart card statement, and then they've got their actual budget. So if you're going to have board members who aren't going to read through the actual budget, bring them back to that budget summary. That was great. we are wrapping up on time. I'm going to show you one more. You can see we've got some here in CKLS. This is Lincoln. She's doing a very good job keeping the board informed about library staff. They've got a statue project going on, insurance, air conditioning, Wi-Fi after hours. So you can see if the Wi-Fi after hours, I would probably handle this differently. They talked about the cash and where they're missing some money and what the solution would be. Remember, I talked about librarians are one of our competencies is to provide solutions to problems. And here they talk about the solution. That's wonderful. Keeping the board appraised as to when you're receiving the money from the city. And I bet she also reports when the money from CKLS is received. A problem with the toilet, that can say, hey, we're going to maybe have to do something about that soon. They've got volunteers. You've got your SLP numbers, programming attendance numbers right here. That's very good, very good. And here she's talking, and I pointed, you couldn't see me, I'll use my mouse. Here, she's letting them know that something is going to come up in December, and she's wondering if any board members would be available to help. I know that librarians often complain that they can't get any help from their board members, but remember, the board members' responsibility is not to help with programming, but to govern the library. Any other questions? Now I'm going to look and see if I can make it open up into the picture. There we go, maybe. Nope, I can't see everybody. I don't know what's going on. Any other questions, or is that it?
I don't see any questions, but we can give them a few minutes.
Absolutely.
I will just let you know that the folder that Gail has been talking about will be sent out with the email. We'll get this video archived and sent out. Hopefully I can get it done before the end of the day. It'll be out in your email. And we are working on something called LibGuides. They're subject guides with links to everything related to a subject. And one of those LibGuides that we are going to have is going to be the archives of this year's workshops, so that there's one easy place to find all our videos and all our handouts and all that information that we've been doing with Tuesdays with CKLS, in-person workshops, all in one place. And I hope to have that up, well, by the end of the year, but hopefully sooner than that. I don't want to give myself a deadline I can't meet, but I want to have that archive up and available before the end of the year, if not sooner.
Right, right. I think that the Tuesdays with CKLS is going really well. What I know is that this is something that would never be worth having an all-day or a half-a-day workshop on, but yet it's critical because it's something that as directors we do every single month. And so I think that through the Tuesdays with CKLS we're actually able to do a lot of different trustee things that we're really not able to do otherwise. Trustee things, training things otherwise. If you've got any ideas for Tuesdays with CKLS, be sure and let Mary Beth know. And it doesn't have to be a big thing. There's nothing wrong with us spending a half an hour on one topic and a half an hour on with another topic. Which brings me, Mary Beth, what are we doing next month?
Next month is actually a change in date. Kathy Ron will be talking about talking books and books for the physically handicapped, and it'll be on the 4th Tuesday, I believe it is, Tuesday, let me pull it up on my calendar here real quick. Wait. Tuesday, October 30th will be next month's Tuesday with CKLS. It'll be at the same time at 1:30 in the afternoon.
Great. Margie just texted or chatted to me privately and she said, do you have a list of reports the directors can use to report the stats I referenced? And I said, I don't. And Margie said she could help with that. So what I would look for soon, in addition to these things here, is a list of the reports that you can use to generate the statistics, the circulation statistics particularly that we called out there. That's a great idea.
Yeah, and one I like to use, I always reference it in the links for annual reporting. And if you use them all year long, then like Gail said, it won't take you long at all to do your annual report in January. And so if you look in reports in Koha, there's a tab called Annual Reports, and there's a whole kit and caboodle of reports there for you to go through. If you want just the specific ones that I list every year, we can send those to you as well. And Margie has been working her Koha magic and getting
yes.
So she might have something that you haven't even seen yet.
And I really am going to put a plug in for the Share It tool. It is at the top of the browser bar in Pathfinder in Koha on the landing page. If you haven't looked at it, if you have not seen anything about it, or you don't know how to use it, please contact me, because it will save you so much time, energy, effort, and keeping track of not only your materials, but your borrows in Lens on Share It. So give it a try. I've worked out some of the kinks. I know Logan is using it. Kelly at Phillipsburg is using it. And, you know, like anything, it took me a little while to tweak it around, but I think it's working pretty well now. So
it's amazing.
I just highlighted it here. It's here on this the staff side of Koha. There's a tab that said Share It, and play around with it, see what you think. It's very useful.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it reminds you to check things in. It keeps track of everything for you. It'll also, it has a report for your record cleanup. It is, I think you'll find it so much easier than multiple places that you're making records and doing all these different things that, you know, I think it'll really help you a lot. So give it a test drive.
And oh, here we go. We also have Erica says, appreciate all the info without the travel or leaving my library. Didn't have to arrange for a sub. So
glad you liked it, Erica. These Tuesdays with CKLS came about because librarians like you who it's difficult to leave the library, let us know, and we worked on it. And so be sure and let us know any topics. We're already starting to fill in the calendars for next year. While I've got mostly directors on here, one of the things that I'm going to give a plug for is next year I'm going to actually do a quarterly director meeting, and we're just going to talk about the directoring stuff that we need to be aware of, just how to get better. So if there are topics that apply to you as a director that you would like to know more about, just shoot me an email and I will be glad to touch on those for you next year. And if you need help now, please ask us now. You know, you don't have to wait. So you can see the beauty that is my office back here now. It's all good. I think we're probably about done.
I think so.
I want to thank everyone for attending. If you have any questions, as always, you can send me an email directly, or if you don't want to talk to me, you can ask any other consultant. My feelings won't be hurt by that. We're here to work for you. Thank you, and have a lovely day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.